theyeshiva.net.
So the point we began to explore yesterday's shir, the beginning of the Maimer V'hinei Anachnu Almim Alumim, was that in various svarim, particularly of Pnimiyus HaTorah of Kabbalah, there's the famous concept called Shviras HaKelim. Literally, it means the breaking or the shattering of the vessels. And the way it's described is that every vessel contains a light, an energy, an air, and the vessels broke, so they're not containing anymore the light. A vessel, when it's broken, cannot anymore function as a vessel, as a container, because it broke. So the substance, whatever was in the container, also must leave, because it can't be contained anymore, because the vessel was shattered. It's the literal meaning of a shvira of a keli. And the way the Kabbalah describes it is that this is the meaning of the kings who were in Edom before the Jewish people ever had a king. At the end of Parshas Vayishlach, 7 kings died, that these represent, on a spiritual level, obviously in addition to the literal interpretation, but they also are a parable or a metaphor or an allegory for what's called 7 kings of Tohu, who all experienced a shviras hakelim, a breaking of the vessel, which is called Vayamas. Vayimlach, they reigned, each one reigned, Vayamas, and it went through some death, some major transformation, where its function, the way it was before, ceased because of something we call a nefillah, that the kelim broke and they fell. He says first a place called Ban of Atzilus, which is a source of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, and then from there into Bri Yitzir Asiyah. He says what fell? There's the falling of souls, falling of malachim, and there's the nefillah, the falling and transformation of koiches alakim, of divine energies. And when you say they fell into Bri Yitzir Asiyah, it means they actually became a source of life for Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Which means that Shviras HaKelim is not a little thing. It means that it's somehow essential and indispensable to the entire story of the universes, all the universes, and the story of creation. So, the first thing we learn from here is, when you learn about spiritual stuff, so it's described as events, the breaking of the vessels. So we always imagine somehow there's vessels, and they're shattered, and they're broken, and there's a lot of chaos, like an explosion, Parshas. And things break and are fragmented and divided into pieces. And it's hard for us to extricate ourselves from physical images, because that's just the world we live in and how our brains work. But really, the explanation in this Maimer teaches us that it's all metaphoric. Meaning when the word Shviras HaKelim is used, it's using a metaphor of something physical, but it's really just conveying a concept. It's conveying an experience. It's conveying a certain emotion, a certain attitude, which allows us to be able to appreciate it in a more profound way. When you say Hashem created Shviras HaKelim, there was a Shviras HaKelim, what does it really mean? It means in the metaphor of the Balatanya, that when you have Beis and Reish and Vav and Chav together, you have a word. In other words, the letters become containers that express an idea, an insight, called Baruch. When you break up the word, and the letters are now in different locations, different regions, one letter is here, one letter is there, essentially, technically, everything remained the same. There's no difference. In other words, Shviras HaKelim doesn't have to look dramatic. Nothing happened. The Beis is here, the Reish is here, the Vav is here, the Chaf is here. And yet, everything that happened before is gone. Everything that happened before is gone. Why? Because their separation creates their isolation from each other. And the isolation that they each experience does not allow them to see themselves any longer as a keli for an oir. There's no baruch coming through me. Sorry, I'm just a reish. And now I have to struggle to figure out what a reish is. Fine. So I go to therapy to figure out what's a reish, what's the value of a reish, who I am. I can't see myself anymore as part of the whole because the Beis is on his journey and the Vav is on his journey, the Chaf is on his journey. What's this? So this is all a mashal. What's this a mashal for? Okay. I thought marriage was supposed to undo Shviras HaKelim, but okay.
That's where you hold it.
There was once a professor of English, so he turned to he was talking to his students. He asked the students if anybody knows, a teacher of English, he wasn't a professor. So he asked the students if anybody knows the difference between, in the English language, the difference between a battle and an engagement. So one student said, yeah, one is before the wedding and one is afterward. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. I know it's early in the morning, but it was just a joke. He said what he said. It just engagement. Oh, you just got it. Okay. So now we can understand what's this a mashal for. That Shviras HaKelim is not just some weird explosion that happened. Shviras HaKelim is responsible for the very paradigms that underlie our instinctive attitude towards existence and towards the world. Generally, there are four worlds that we speak of: Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiya. Atzilus is the world of Achdus, the world of oneness. In other words, the cosmos, the way it's experienced as one. And then you have an evolution into a world of Bria, a world of Yitzira, and a world of Asiya. We inhabit the world of Asiya. When I say we inhabit, it doesn't mean the other worlds are not here. Our consciousness is usually formed in the paradigms of the world of Asiya, which is the world that we all inhabit. Now, no two people inhabit the same world. That's a fact. No two people sitting in the same room are experiencing the same reality. You can have two people sitting in the same room. One is experiencing bliss, the other one is having a headache, one is angry, the other is elated. So no two people are ever living in the same world, even if we're physically living in the same world. Because what you bring into the world, what you see in the world, defines the world you're living in. We all understand that. Your attitudes, your feelings, your perspectives, right? It's part of the human condition. So we already see that a person could be living in one world, the other person sitting right near him is living in another world. It's the same table, it's the same cup, but the same glasses, but the glasses, what I see is a different reality. You're sitting in front of a person, one person is experiencing this, another person experiencing something different. But generally, in generalities, this is the world of Asiya. The unique characteristic of Bria, and even more Yitzira, and even more Asiya, is division. Mitzias. What do we mean by Mitzias? There are Bruyim, Miminim, and Minim Shainim. There's endless diversity of creations, spiritual or physical, and each one struggles to maintain its own identity. And that's how we define ourselves in terms of my identity. My Zahus, my Mohus. No. He says the Atzilus is not part of Shviras HaKelim. The first process of Shviras HaKelim is that the kings fell down to Shem Ban of Atzilus, which is the source of Bia. That's the lowest space of Atzilus, which is a source of Bri Yitzir Asiya. That's where the Kelim, so to speak, fell into. And from there, they fell into actual Bri Yitzir Asiya. What do we mean they fell into it? Again, we're using physical language. It basically means the Rebbeinu Shalom decided and chose that from a concept of complete unity and oneness, there should be a concept of Shviras HaKelim, which allows for the keli not expressing that oir, and each letter becomes an independent letter. And he said that Hashem himself, Atzmos Hamatzel, is Yachid u'Meyuchad, is completely one. Creation, the way we understand it, all of the created beings are not only with ribui, tremendous multitudes, so much, but also with division. Division is, there's a fragmentation. Survival, like survival of the fittest. I don't mean here survival of the fittest in scientific terms or pseudo-scientific terms. I just mean the concept, I am I, imei nanili. Let's use that expression, is better. Imei nanili mili. Pirkei Avos Hillel says, if I'm not for myself, who will be here for me? And in many ways, that's called responsibility. Responsibility means nurturing who you are or the people around you. But definition of Bria is that everything is a yesh v'davar b'fnei atzmai. It's self-contained. And the Balatanya writes the words, which are very poignant words, that it's amitis hamenaged al amitis achdusei baruch hu she'einoid mulvada. Essentially, this is the ultimate opposition to the truth of his unity. There's nothing outside of him. The cardinal state of reality is that all is one. So how do we experience, and it's not an experience that's by mistake if you're having a bad day. It's ingrained in the definition of life. Every nivra, from a human being to a mammal, to a fish, to a bird, in many ways to a cell, to an atom. Living organisms, inorganic material, everything has its own metzius. What's the process that allows reality to go from oneness to absolute division and fragmentation? That process, in mystical language, we call Shviras HaKelim. So it's just a process that we have a name for it. The name for it is Shviras HaKelim. What does Shviras HaKelim do? Shviras HaKelim means that the Kelim are shattered, meaning they're experiencing themselves as individual particles. As a result of that, first of all, there's so much, because there's a Beis and there's a Reish and there's a Vav and a Chaf separate. When they're together, there's no Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf. What is there? There's Baruch. And the letters are just facilitators, Kelim, conduits for Baruch. The Beis and the Reish are different, of course, but they're not really different. They're just conveying the idea of blessing. But when they're broken apart, suddenly there's so much. There's four. And this is just a mushal of four. You have 4, and you have 14, and you have 400, and you have 4,000, and you go add till infinite numbers. More. How many creatures are there? How many species are there? And within every species and subspecies. And that's living organisms. And we're talking about the physical world, the spiritual world. Every star to every galaxy, to again, every little mosquito and bee, and every tiny insect or reptile, and every tiny every molecule or atom or cell or subatomic particle. Over there, the numbers really get pretty. How many subatomic particles are there? Too many. But it's not just many. It's very bediuk here, he says. First of all, there's many. Without it, there's no many, there's one. Even if there's many, there's one. Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf is not many, it's not 4, it's one. Because you hear the oir. When you sense the oir, 4 become 1. When you don't sense the oir, 4 become 4. When you don't sense the light, you're not the conveyor of a message. 4 is not 1, 4 is 4. Beis is Beis and Reish is Reish. So you have the alphabet has 22 letters, but remember those 22 letters allow endless configurations. Just the letters Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled can be configured in 24. And you go one more letter, 5, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, you have 120 configurations. 120 ways of and each one is different. That's in terms of quantity, but also in terms of quality or in terms of identity. It's not just there's many. There's also a pirud, meaning it's not just there's you and there's me and so there's two of us. It's not anymore two of us. It's you and it's I. It's not just there's 10 of us, there's 100 of us. There's a self-replicating cell. So there's 1,000,000 of us. No, there's not 1,000,000,000,000 of us. There's me and there's you. So it's both in terms of Shviras HaKelim creates the quantity. Beis and Reish are now two, they're not one. But also, what are they? I am a Beis, I'm a Reish. We don't look alike, and we're not going to look alike. They're eretz, boundaries. And it's essential to creation. I am I, and you are you. Both in terms that there's two of us, and it's not only us, there's an I and there's a you, I and thou. Or there's a you and there's an I. So now let's go further. Vihine. It's like, I don't know, mamash in the middle of the page, the line starts b'fnei atzmai. B'fnei atzmai. Beis fei ayin, you see. Vihine. Kasher yordu hakelim v'anitzutus meis panav yizbarach. As the vessels and the sparks descend from his presence, Lefi goydel hayiride nasa behem, kach nasa behem apirud v'haribui. The more descent, the more division, the more fragmentation and diversity, and the more ribui. The more numbers. V'chol sha'adayin lo yardu kol kach. The less the descent, the less the distance from what we call atzmos hamatzel from Hashem, the less the distance. Azay lo haya pirut kol kach. The separation, the sense of separateness won't be so strong. Ki kol hakarev karev yoyser elav yizbarach yesh ba yoyser habitul v'ha'achtos. Because the closer you are to sensing the source, the more you have two experiences, bittul and achdos. Bittul is the lack of separateness, the bittul, the nullification of the I as separate, and therefore the unity with all else and with the source of all. And the more the vessels and the sparks are distanced in identity, as I nasa ben yoser hapirud v'haribui. The more division, the more fragmentation, the more separation, and ribui, the more multitudes, the more there's increasing different, the more there is. V'nimtza, thus, k'shenaflu l'mata b'asiyah, the moment the vessels and the sparks hit what we would call rock bottom, they hit asiyah, which is the lowest world. Not Bri. Bri is also Shviras HaKelim. Yitzir is also Shviras HaKelim. But the moment they hit us, Aza Nasa Pirud Varibui B'Yoser. Here, the division and the fragmentation and the enormous quantity accelerate to unique numbers. I almost feel that explaining this is like violating the words. So what would the world look like without Shviras HaKelim? Can you experience that? I mean, I could talk about it. The question is, can you experience it? If there was no Shviras HaKelim, what would the world look like?
Would there be a world?
Yeah, okay, good question. Olam Haba is after Shviras HaKelim, sorry. Olam Abriya is already Shviras HaKelim. It's not like Asiyah, but... So the truth is, we go back to the mashal. But what does that mean? It would be exactly the same world. That's my point, that Shviras HaKelim is not like a cataclysmic explosion. It would be exactly the same world. It's a switch of vocabulary. It's a change of paradigm. It's a change of experience, which changes everything. Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf, when they're together or when they're separate, are exactly the same letters. You don't change the shape. You don't change the sound. You don't change the pronunciation. Beis is Beis, Reish is Reish, Vav is Vav, Vav is Chav. Baruch. I didn't change anything. It's exactly the same. The Beis, the way it's part of a word, and the Beis, the way it's not part of a word, it's exactly the same Beis. On every level, in terms of numerology, in terms of shape, in terms of sound, in terms of meaning. But everything is different. What's the difference? The difference is the Beis, when it's part of Baruch, you say, imagine you take the Beis, say, come, I'm making words. I'm writing the word Baruch. But what? No. Individuality, democracy, freedom. If I'm not going to, this is codependence. You want to control me? This doesn't exist. I have to be on my own. I already suffered from too much codependence in my house. I have issues with confidence. I am not going there. But the truth is, what happens to the Beis when it becomes part of Reish Vav Chav? It becomes part of, yeah. It's actually fulfilled. What's the function of letters? The function of letters, of Oisius, is to be able to convey ideas and experiences of life. I found it interesting that from all the words he could have used, he uses the word Baruch. He could have used any word. Could have used the word Bereshis as the first word of Chumash, right? Could have used any word. Could have used the word Es, Hashamayim, Vesaretz. But the Baal Tanya chose from all the words to use the word Baruch. Why? You could speculate. My speculation would be to talk about blessing Jews, blessing people. So you have to give a mashal, uses the word Baruch. It's just a lesson of where a person's mind is. Just instinctively, you have to choose a word. Some people will find the word klala. You can also use that word. It works. Kof lamed lamed hey. Some people will find the word baruch. It's just an instinctive, subconscious expression. Just in parentheses. So, what happens here? The Beis and the Reish and the Vav and the Chaf remain the same, but two things. Number one, the Beis and the Reish are not anymore considered separate letters. What do I mean? Of course they're considered separate letters. If they wouldn't be separate, you wouldn't have a word Baruch. But what it means is, the definition of the Beis and the Reish is what? A conveyor of a word. When I'm reading the word Baruch, when you hear me say the word Baruch, you don't hear a Beis and a Reish. You hear Baruch. So 4 letters are conveying one concept called a blessing. So first of all, the 4 turn into 1, not by obliterating their individuality. If you would obliterate their individuality, you wouldn't have a word. Ba 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 is not Baruch. I'm saying you need the 4 letters to convey this. But the 4 are different, and yet they're completely not different. They're one. Why are they one? Because they are kalim for the oir. Because they see themselves as vessels for their oir. We see them that way. So therefore, 2 things happen. First of all, 4 are not experienced as 4, they're experienced as 1. And the identity of each of them doesn't contradict the other. On the contrary, they experience themselves as one entity. What would the world look like without Shviras HaKelim? If you have 4 letters, Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf, we call DNA letters. Every living organism has a DNA. The DNA is incredible in its term of ribui. How much? They say if you would be a scroll and you would be able to open it up, it would fill the height of the Empire State Building 3 times. And that's the code that's in your cell, which is microscopic. That's how much, if you would want to decipher it with letters and read it. So the whole world is oisius, it's DNA. But without Shviras HaKelim, we would look at ourselves, we would look at everybody else, everything else, and what would we feel? Achdus. Einoid Mulvade. What's that Einoid Mulvade? Einoid Mulvade is there's only oneness. There's you and I, but in Baruch, the you and the I may be very different. But when you sense that when you sense the light, so therefore you become a keli for the So it's not many anymore, it's one, and it's not many types. It's one essence that's being conveyed, even if for that I have to be a Beis and you have to be a Reish. Shviras HaKelim changed that completely. What Shviras HaKelim says is, and it's really just it's just a prescription of the glasses. It's just if I could see the Reish near the Beis or not. Or my glasses cut me off after the Beis. They just cut me off, so all I could see is this. There are people who have glasses of Olam HaTzilus. There's glasses of Bria, there's glasses of Yitzir, there's glasses of Asiyah. What's the difference of the glasses? Same Beis. But what I feel, what I experience is, first of all, there's Ribui. There's so much. It's not anymore us. There's so much. There's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and each one is separate, distinct. The closer you go back to the source, the less ribui, the less pirud, the more achdus. The further you go away from the source in consciousness, the more pirud, the more achdus. The more you sense the source, the oneness. So mamish in the source, there's complete no separateness. When there's a shviras hakelim, depends how much it's shattered. The closer it is to the source, the less will be pirud, the less richuk, the less ribui. The further from the source, the more pirud and the more ribui. Yeah.
Can you live in the Olam Asiyah on a daily basis and still be as close to the source?
We'll soon see. We'll talk about that. And in many ways, you have here a description of some of the symptoms of what we call today trauma. Which usually results in a very acute and profound sense of isolation. There's a space of loneliness, of solitariness that I operate in and I can't get out of because of a traumatic event, a traumatic experience, a series of traumatic events, whether subtle or very powerful or very intense. Could be many, many sources for it and manifestations in so many ways. But often a very common denominator is that I'm completely on my own. And I'm on my own, maybe not physically, I may be surrounded by a lot of people and have a lot of acquaintances, but existentially, I am completely alone in the universe. And I can't even imagine survival out of that place. This is the place where, this is the only place I know for survival. And sometimes a person doesn't even realize that that's what they're dealing with. Because this is the only vocabulary they know. This is the only attitude that they have in life. They may not even know that they're dealing with this. And essentially, all trauma comes from a shviras hakelim. A shviras hakelim means that the natural, cardinal, innate relationships that vibrate through the universe are shattered in my imagination. And because they're shattered in my imagination, so you could talk to me from today till tomorrow about a different reality. It's not my experience anymore. My experience is I'm completely alone. I'm mamash alone. Anybody relates to what I'm saying? And it's very, very deep. It's very serious. It's a very, very intense. And it's almost like a switch. It's like it's a switch. Shviras hakelim again doesn't have to look very dramatic. It could look very dramatic. It could, and it could be that one cataclysmic event that created that explosion where everything was shattered. All relationships were shattered. All trust was shattered. All connection was shattered. All attachment was shattered. That's what shattered means. Really, in a world of no shviras hakelim, there's complete oneness. Humanity is one. The planet is one. The cosmos is one. We're all one. And one doesn't mean codependence. One doesn't mean that my nose has to look like your nose or my brain is your brain. Beis and Reish don't look the same. Oneness can be experienced in complete diversity. But diversity doesn't mean fragmentation and division. Diversity means like a Beis and a Reish. But there's absolute oneness. What does it mean to have a real relationship with God? We speak about living with God, oneness with God. What does it really mean? What does it mean? So the Baal HaTanya here gives the klal. The closer one is to a divine consciousness, the more they can experience the oneness in the world. The closer you could become to another person emotionally, the more you can experience oneness in yourself. The more you can experience the harmony in yourself, not because you don't have a lot of forces in you. Of course you have a lot of forces, you have a lot of voices. But you could see everything as one keli, as letters of one keli. So the oir comes through it, and the oir is one. B'meila they're working together. That becomes their definition. Their definition becomes a definition of oneness, because they're conveying that light. The more shvira, the more shattered, the more separateness. The less unity within myself, and the less the experience of unity with another. And ultimately with the world, with the planet. It's not just with another person, it's ultimately with the world, with the cosmos. So the higher we go, I mean higher, I don't mean physically higher. The higher we go mean the less I'm affected by the shattering, the more I experience oneness. The more I'm affected by the shattering, the less I experience oneness. When there's a complete shattering in my life, in the world of Asiya, the Kalim really hit, boom, and they broke. Now, there's the jungle. There's experience of the jungle inside of me and outside of me. This is a world of war. It's a world of violence. Survival. And the definition of survival is me, myself, or my own little group, which is also part of myself. My family, my tribe, my community. But it's always in terms of me versus you. Always in terms of me versus you. You mentioned marriage. I wasn't thinking of going there, but since you mentioned me, so you forced me to give that mashal. Somehow it's a mashal that everybody understands. I don't know why, but whatever. We'll figure that out. There's two types. You see, there's two types of marriage. I don't know if you can call them two types of marriages, but there's two types of married couples, the way they operate. One is in a language of Shviras HaKelim, and one is a language pre-Shviras HaKelim. What's the language of a marriage in Shviras HaKelim when they're sitting on the couch in front of the rabbi, in front of their therapist, in front of their coach, in front of a friend? What's the language of Shviras HaKelim, you think, between a couple? Post-Shvira and pre-Shvira. The whole language changes. The whole language changes. Okay. Maybe you have different experiences. It's not a steer. Now, and this is not about words. It's not even about ideas. It's about experience. I may be a very nice person. A husband may be a very fine person. A wife may be a very nice person. It's not about the words you use. You could use very nice words. I'm talking about your real inner experience. Ultimately, do I experience you as my stira, right? Zela umaz, you are my competition. That's how I'm experiencing. And that may be an experience. And that experience is a direct product of Shviras HaKelim. And I have to work that through, because it's coming from somewhere. It's not a fake experience. You can't just tell a person, you're such a selfish, horrible person, right? You can ask the therapists who are sitting here, what would happen if a couple would walk in, the husband would say something, the wife would say something, the therapist, even if he's thinking that, turns to him and says, you're just a narcissistic, disgusting person. Give me my check and get out of my office. You're not going to work with somebody. Why are you not going to work with them? You may be right. But there's a process here. There's a process that brought a person to this experience. It doesn't justify obnoxious behavior. But if a person is experiencing something, you have to be able to deal with that experience if you want to help them come to a deeper or more enlightened or loving or compassionate place of harmony and peace. And Shviras HaKelim never happens first with other people. It first happens with yourself. And as a result, it translates in my relationships with everybody else, including, first and foremost, with the relationships of the people who are around you most, both in terms of time and in terms of intimacy. So the klal of the more divine consciousness, the more oneness. The less divine consciousness, the less oneness. Why? It's almost simple mathematics. The definition of the divine is Ein Od Milvadai. There's nothing outside of this one truth. So if I'm in touch with that, I'm experiencing oneness. The more I'm in touch with it, the more I'm open to that. The less I'm in touch with it, the more I'm closed off from that reality. And the further I am in terms of consciousness and awareness, the further I am from that reality. In the world of Asiya, the Shviras HaKelim really reaches a crescendo. It's clear? Rabbi Litzman, what's not clear? You can relate to Shviras HaKelim or pre-Shviras HaKelim? Which one can you relate to?
Thinking about, somebody says in Hayom, what do you Hasidus accomplish? We are not alone, we're one family.
Yeah. The Tzemach Tzedek asked the Balatanya, what Chassidus accomplished?
That's what I feel. So
You feel like one family. Okay. I knew that the problem that you didn't relate to was post-Shviras HaKelim. I knew that was the issue. Okay, well, there's a lot of medications available to experience Shviras HaKelim if you want to go to that place. There's a lot of things available. I can introduce you to certain people. I can introduce you to certain events. And Shviras HaKelim will become very realistic. Huh? Okay, du willst leben in Kedusha. Soll dir wohl sein. Ja?
Torah says by Adam,
Loi toive yoisa Adam levadai. Very well. Eseloi ezer kenegda, yeah?
what does that really mean? Because if you could be, if we people in this room and that they're alone, are physically in the relationship, are physically in the environment, but I'm wrong.
Yeah, I didn't mean levade doesn't mean just physical company. You could be sitting on an airplane or in an airport with 50,000 people, but you're alone. And you could be on the couch with your spouse, but you're alone. And you could be with friends and acquaintances and people you grew up with and neighbors and 100 cousins at a Hanukkah party, but you're still alone. You're broken. I don't mean you, I mean the person is broken. They don't see it that way. Remember, Shviras HaKelim, I don't tell myself I'm broken, because if I tell myself I'm broken, I'm already not so broken. You know what I mean? The Beis finds a new identity. The Beis doesn't say, oh, I need to go back to Baruch. That's already not so broken. Yeah? That's already the awareness that you're broken. In other words, it's not where you belong. In real Shvira, the Beis redefines its identity. It works very, very hard to make a sensible, logical structure from isolation, which is real trauma. It almost works. It almost works. I almost build a castle of a house of cards. I build an infrastructure for my problems. You know what I mean? I turn it almost into a philosophy. What's the problem of a lot of ideas and philosophies? Not that they're foolish, that they become self-respecting philosophies. It's like you're acting out of pain, so just acknowledge it. No, I'm not acting out of pain. This is the actual right way to live. And that's a different level of Shviras HaKelim. You teufus what I'm saying or not?
why can't you be alone but not lonely?
Yeah, alone but not lonely is a different thing. We're not talking about alone but not lonely. I'm talking about lonely. You have to be alone. There's a place of aloneness. As I told you, the Beis and the Reish don't look alike. You understand? If the Beis says, I don't want to be alone, I want to melt away in your presence. You're not going to have baruch anymore. For the Ur to come through this keli, the keli has to be whole. And you can't obliterate any letter. By obliterating a letter, you're not helping achdus. Very important. You understand? By obliterating letters, you don't say it's going to be more unity. Let's just leave a resh. Yeah. Somebody once told me the best solution for marital strife is, not getting married. Yeah. So why don't you encourage that? He says, why don't you encourage people to do that? There won't be any strife. Yeah. So it's like saying, let the reish be alone, get rid of the beis, the vav and the chaf, and we'll have einoid mulvadai. That's not einoid mulvadai. That's the ultimate trauma. The beis and the reish, vav and chaf don't have to be alone. They're together. But they're together, they become a keli for the or. So you don't eliminate one in order to create that unity. If you're doing that, it means you're actually not in that place. It means you're in a place of complete fear. So the only way I can deal with the beis is by killing you. There's a t-shirt somebody once told me they saw. I'm very easy to get along with once you learn to worship me. Right? What's that? If everybody worships me, I'm very easy to get along with. It's Einoid Mulvadi. Not Einoid Mulvadoi, Einoid Mulvadi. Which is not oneness even with myself. It's a form of control. Because it's actually a lack of oneness. I'm completely not in control, so I have to control.
What is the goal?
Shviras HaKelim didn't happen in one day. And you want the tikkun to happen in 5 minutes? The first goal is to become aware of the union of Shviras HaKelim. And then there is the process of, now Shviras HaKelim wasn't a mistake. It's not like God said I had a really bad day today and all the Kelim broke. Shviras HaKelim is not a mistake. It's so fundamental to our life. It's important. But then there is where the avodah of a person comes in. This is the revolution to which the Jewish people were summoned. When you speak about God's chosen people, what does it mean? So the Alter Rebbe in this Maimon is going to explain what that means. The Jewish people were summoned to be able to come into a world which is completely impacted by Shviras HaKelim and inspire a new state of consciousness, which is the essence of all of Judaism, as the Maimon will continue to explore, and we'll explore Be'ez Hashem tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Have a wonderful day. It's not just fixing it, it's more dramatic than that. If you're just fixing it, you didn't have to break it. Right? If you just want to fix it, don't break it, so you don't have to fix it. It's more than fixing. It begins with, it's of course it's a state of mind. It's always a state of mind. Yeah. It begins in a state of mind, yeah. The whole Shviras HaKelim is a state of mind. It's not God took a hammer and started to break letters. You understand? It's the same DNA. It's the same DNA. It's just the glasses I wear, the prescription. You understand? There's a prescription of the Alter Rebbe, and when you look at the world, there's another prescription. That's all. It's all about a prescription. It's called a vantage point, perspective.
We asked why the Alter chose the name Baruch, because of the word Baruch.
Yeah.
What was the family name?
His father was Baruch. You're right. His father's name was Baruch. So maybe it's a form of Kibbud Av. Rashi, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, the first Rashi. Very good. Zog is good. The Alter Rebbe's taught that Geis and Baruch. Yeah, I forgot.
How do you explain the steps? Meaning, it's so white, black and white. It's not like water.
Good question. Good question. Either you're broken or you're not broken. Excellent question. So why is there Briya, Yetzira, Asiya? Either you're in or you're out. Okay, that needs a little hesber. In the mashal of Baruch, it doesn't exist. Either you're in or you're out. If you put bays here, you put it there, it's not, yeah. Right. We'll explain. Bli nada.
Kodesh Baruch Hu, it was essential, Shviras HaKelim.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he was lonely.
Yeah. Shrius HaKelim was essential to create otherness. Exactly.
Otherwise, he
Yeah,
remains
yeah,
lonely for the forever.
yeah. Without Shrius HaKelim, Einoid Mulvadoi remains just the rule without anything else.
That's right. You can't experience it.
Yeah. There's no experience of Einoid Mulvadoi. Yeah.
Why do we want to be Misaki?
It's not that we want to misak in it. It's just we want to experience what it means to be broken and what it means to be reunited.
All the mystical journeys that people are on, everything, they're just looking for Ein Shura for their Maimer.
Shem Yichud.
Shem Yichud. Yeah.
You lose your identity when you're one. The base loses his identity when he's together with the word.
I don't see it as losing your identity. You actually,
Base anymore, it's borrowed.
you're aligned with your true identity. What's a base? What's the function of a base?
By itself or together. It's not meant to be alone.
Together you bring out the beauty of the base. You actually shine much more because you're able to accomplish.
You say your identity is even greater.
Think of the jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
You take a piece, you say, I'm not giving up my identity. And you hang it up in your dining room. It's a piece. You take the puzzle and you hang it up. It's a piece of art. So the piece doesn't lose itself. On the contrary, it's a lot.
It shines more. Basically,
Yeah.
you're actually getting more.
Somebody will say, I think I'm going to amputate my hand. I don't want it to be part of the whole brain thing. I don't want it to be. My hand has its own chashivas. What happens to the hand? A dead piece of flesh that decomposes. When the hand is under the control of the brain, what happens? It's
When you're by
it's one.
yourself, you actually don't have an identity then?
You do. It's not almost like the
No, I mean,
cutting off a hand.
When you're lonely and traumatized, yeah.
It's that feeling, but you still have that vibration of
Well, oneness is true, so you're never really cut off. Well, you're never really cut off. But the point here is that the Achdus doesn't obliterate identity. On the contrary, it aligns you with who you really are.
together with something.
You're not just together, that's who you really are. Since Einaid Mulvadai, so this is your real Mahus. The function of a hand is that it's part of a body, it's part of a living organism. It's not competing with the stomach and the leg and the pancreas and the heart. It's not competing.
Now it could work.
Yeah. And its problem is that it sees itself as separate. That's part of the Shvira. Part of the Shvira is that I struggle with this. I'm separate, I'm not separate. Who am I? Am I going to lose myself? In pre-Shvira, I don't see myself as separate.
That's why
You understand what I'm saying?
people are in a deep Shiras Akilim. They want to, some of them commit suicide because they want to die. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They can't
Yeah.
find themselves back into
Yeah.
this world.
Yeah.
So the ultimate peace, the ultimate
Yeah.
unity with
Yeah.
the universe is just not in their
Yeah.
perspective, not
Yeah.
in their vision.
Yeah. I must say.
It's a very lonely place.
In the beginning of the Shia, I think I heard that hanging around with your heaven, hanging around with your surrounding that doesn't necessarily mean that you're half tickler. So is there an avoid of going out or like a person is allowed to choose his Hasidus, his Tzededish, or an avoid of going and
Yeah, of course. There's a place. Yeah, he's saying, what about the idea of people choose their chabura, their beis medrash, places where they like to daven or learn or hang out with people? Yeah. So that's a very valuable sense to the point that a person feels that there's a place where they're growing and they're being challenged and people understand them and relate to them. There's nothing.
in the real taking, you should be able to go anywhere.
Yeah, the thing is, if people become stuck there.
Instead of therapists, you go to Shul.
It's because you don't want change.
Yeah, if I defy any change, and it's always a distinction you make. A person goes home at night because they feel comfortable at home. It's a blessing. They don't have to run away. They have a place they call home. We cherish that. There's places that bring out the best in you. People who make you feel comfortable, people who you appreciate, you respect, you enjoy. That's Ein Torah niknas ala b'chabura, the Mishnah says. Huh?
That's my question. If the place can still bring out.
I don't have to change my chavrusa every day.
I'm not asking for knowledge. I'm asking if you have a certain place which does not bring out the best of you, does that mean working yourself and try to go back?
Okay, so that depends on a lot of, that depends on your mindset, what's the relationship, how toxic it is, where you're coming from.
A lot of stuff used to be toxic and it's not so toxic, maybe untoxic. Is it toxic by yourself or it's toxic by the day?
So das darf man wissen, and what your role can be there, just to go there to be miserable and make everybody else miserable is nicht mitzvah. The question is, am I serving a benefit? For me, for them, for all of us? If I'm going with a mindset of what you would call, there's a mission here, there's something positive here. A shlichus, call it a shlichus, a mission, something, it's adarabah.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.